This is it, our top 10 Editor's Choice Awards for 2016 and Consensus Game of the Year. You're listening to the 1P versus 2P podcast. I'm Taylor Ray. With me, as always, is my brother and co-host, Ryan Ray. Thank you for listening. We're back from a really long holiday break to wrap up our Game of the Year 2016 coverage. And we're going to begin with our personal top 10 lists, or Editor's Choice Awards, if you will, in reverse order. So starting with number 10 and working our way up to our overall number 1 personal favorite. And then we're going to get into a very short debate about our consensus Game of the Year for our site and this podcast. So I will give up the floor to Ryan to tell us about his number 10 Game of the Year.
My number 10 game this year is Dark Souls 3. That game came out this year and was really, really fantastic. A great final send-off to the Dark Souls series. It actually started for me a renaissance in the Dark Souls games. I've never been able to completely finish those games, and I played through all 3 this summer to completion. Dark Souls 3 is definitely of the 3 main Souls games the most approachable. I found Dark Souls 2 to be actually my personal favorite, and Dark Souls the original, the overt best. However, about Dark Souls 3, I really enjoyed the areas and levels, even though they were a little bit derivative. The bosses, while not as memorable as the original Dark Souls, were very fun to overcome. We started our streaming stuff on this website with me playing through the very first boss of Dark Souls 3 as a naked character, and that was a lot of fun to do, and I continued playing through that character, beat the game from level 1. Really, really fun. They've done a lot of improvements with the UI, and a lot of the oddities and annoyances that were present in previous Dark Souls games have been fixed, leading to some really quality of life upgrades for things like covenants, making them a lot easier to drop in and drop out of those. And for me, a personal highlight of the year was overcoming the hardest boss in the game, a boss called, it's a 2-part boss. King of the Storm is the first phase, and then Nameless King is the second phase. And I beat him on the first try with a fellow player. You can do cooperative play in this game. And the co-op player I brought up was a guy named Zombie Jesus 69, and he was dressed up kind of like the Grim Reaper with a scythe. And it was so funny and awesome, and it just made me feel like I had really kind of like, it made me a better gamer this year, that game. And I really appreciate the way Dark Souls as a series has really brought back difficulty for modern gaming, and Dark Souls 3 was definitely like a wonderful send-off for the series. I can't wait to see what From Software will do next. Taylor, what about your number 10 game this year?
I had a really late change this year. I actually had to bounce out a game that was in my number 10 slot before and replaced it instead with something that I really enjoyed over the holiday break. My father-in-law actually got a PS VR for Christmas, and one of the games that we got to enjoy a lot, among other VR titles, was Rez Infinite. And this is sort of a game that has been legendary, right, on Dreamcast, and I believe there was even a port onto GameCube. A lot of attention was brought to Rez when the PlayStation Experience revealed that Rez Infinite would support the PlayStation VR before that actual physical hardware was released earlier this year. And I just have to say, like, this is the game that you want to own a PS VR for. I really felt that it's the killer app, the only significant one so far as an exclusive. It's just absolute stunning assault on the senses. It's just really just that shining example of how games that are sort of being ported over right now are totally enhanced by VR, not being played in theater mode. The game, I think, originally in its concept, in its game design, when Rez originally came out, was just made for this kind of experience where enemies are flying at you in a 3-dimensional space. Sometimes you're looking off to your left and right, and in VR, that has a lot of weight to it, I thought. There is just an incredible soundtrack already there. The new mode that's in there, that Area X mode, is absolutely stunning. The original game mode where you're just playing through, I believe it's 5 areas and their bosses, just have, already amazing aesthetic, amazing design, gameplay, soundtrack. All of that is incredible. But adding on this Area X really did it for me. Instead, what you're doing in Area X, instead of being on rails, you can have the freedom to move in any direction that you want. And then once you beat a certain amount of enemies, then you can proceed to sort of the next area. Imagine in VR moving your head around a 3D space, being able to fly anywhere, that freedom, to see these characters fly in at you in all directions. It's just really, really incredible, really simple, but just an assault on the senses that I really, really enjoyed. It's really the only reason to own a PSVR so far right now. All right, Ryan, what's your number 9?
Well, from one Matrix-like experience to another, my number 9 is Super Hot, which, if you've played through that entire game, you'll understand why I'm about to say this. It's the most innovative shooter I've ever played. This game has a lot of course, Matrix-like qualities of jumping in and out of the simulation, which for me was actually kind of the weakest part. The parts where you go into the computer terminal, the kind of wrapper around the actual game itself was the weakest part of that presentation. However, the combat arenas and scenarios that the game presents you with are super fun and challenging. It has this kind of super stylish graphical style that a lot is done with the very simple black and white and red color palette that they use. And the sound design in that game, if you play this game with headphones, you can really hear the, every time you throw a sword or shoot a gun, you can really hear bullets whiz by you, the shatter of enemies as soon as you destroy them. When you throw objects, and they burst on impact. It's really amazing sound design. The load times are really quick, which makes possible if you fail or you get killed because, of course, it's a one-hit kill if the enemies hit you. The ability to jump right back into the action with quick restarts. This game just makes the entire concept of bullet time, slow motion combat feel very fresh. This is not a new idea in games. This is an idea that's basically been present since the original Max Payne. And Super Hot just completely takes that idea and makes it super awesome, a lot of fun. Frankly, a really, really cool experience. My understanding, they also released more recently a VR version of this game that has slightly different levels. And I imagine that that's really, really a neat version of that game to look at. I would be eager to try that version of the game once I get a VR headset. But on its own, my only complaint really about Super Hot is that it's too short. I wanted the game to continue going. And there's also a fun twist that happens in the middle of it, which we should also get into just a little bit. And if you haven't noticed by now in the Game of the Year podcast, we're going to get into spoilers. So if you haven't played Super Hot, basically in the middle of that game, you get the ability to jump into your enemies and switch positions with them. And that really turns into some really neat scenarios where you can basically throw a sword at a guy and then switch positions with him, catch your own sword, fight the next guy. It's really amazing. The last boss battle uses this to a great effect. And this is just a really fun game that I recommend anybody check out. I expect that it's on sale right now on the Steam Winter Sale. You should definitely check this game out. It's really, really cool. Taylor, what's your number 9?
My number 9 is Enter the Gungeon. This is a game I actually picked up over Black Friday. And normally, I'm not the kind of guy that seeks out roguelikes, but the visual art style to this game, which is this, I would describe it as maybe 16 or 32-bit pixelated graphics. The art style really drew me in, and I got recommendations about the soundtrack, which is in itself really incredible. It's an overwhelming roguelike. It's this top-down shooter. Well, actually, you can move in any direction, right? It's not a shoot 'em up per se, but essentially what you're doing is you're selecting through one of 4 characters. It's super mysterious. You're not quite sure what each character's abilities do right away, and what their weapons are like, and whether they have significant advantages or disadvantages in the dungeon. It turns out it's difficult no matter which character you're moving forward through. And I say it only has 5 levels, but those 5 levels are just absolutely brutal. We were talking about Dark Souls 3 earlier. This is one of these games where I felt that I was not up to speed, but in a really punishingly yet rewarding way. It's definitely overwhelming. Screen after screen, you got enemy-filled rooms that really challenge your ability to multitask, to dodge, to roll, to run around, and be able to target enemies. And these enemies are really interesting. The character design I thought was really cool. So the Gungeon is all around sort of bullet themed. So every character has some sort of, they're either shaped like an ammo shell, or they have ridiculous Gatling guns attached to them if they don't look like, pieces of ammo. It's very, very neat. I really like what they did there from a style perspective. There are vendors, of course, in the game where you can get enhancements, new weapons. The weapons are truly, truly unique. The last final boss, again, this is sort of a spoiler, so skip ahead 30 seconds, is this giant mecha dragon, which is incredibly difficult to get past. It's so neat. A lot of secrets baked into it that you don't get to experience right away unless you keep dying and re-entering the gungeon and keep trying to complete more runs to get to the end. Just overall, a really, really fun, really, really hard. I believe it's only available on PC now, but I highly, highly, highly recommend it. Of course, if you don't like dying, you're going to hate this game, but it really does reward somebody who perseveres and perfects it, because once you start getting to the later levels without taking a hit, avoiding the bullet hell that is every single level, it's really, really rewarding. It's awesome. All right, moving on, Ryan, your number 8.
My number 8 is Forza Horizon 3. This is kind of the first Horizon game. So the Forza games are basically simulation racing style games, and the Horizon offshoot is kind of more arcade style. And this is the first Horizon game for me that really embraced the breezy, lighthearted nature of this series. And I think its Australian setting really does it a huge, huge favor. It's a gorgeous looking game. They did a really good job with the game's licensed soundtrack. Another one of my personal highlights this year was kind of at the end of the tutorial sort of races. You kind of race along the beach, and right as I did that song "X Gonna Give It to You" came on, and it was perfect. It was perfect. It was right across the Australian sunset. I was racing on a beach. It was really like just a really cool moment. That game, just from start to finish, is really fun. As soon as you have the ability to so your progression through the game basically is you unlocking new concert venues, new areas to kind of unlock more races in. And you have kind of the option every time you level up your status from one of two choices. And your second choice offers you the option to go into the desert. And normally you wouldn't do that, but my pro tip is to actually go ahead and do that, because that unlocks the ability to race in a dune buggy, which makes those races so much more awesome and so off the wall. There's like off-road racing where you like jump into a dune buggy and you're just like soaring into the air in like kind of like an almost out of control experience. Like, it just makes that game really, really fun. They've also introduced kind of these bucket list challenges a la Tony Hawk's Skate, where basically you can set up like drift challenges or trick challenges, or, destroy the most whatever in this set amount of time, or go the furthest off this ramp. And that stuff is really easy to do. And it's also really fun to play, like to challenge your friends and do that stuff. And, this is one of the games that was kind of a standard bearer for Microsoft's Xbox Play Anywhere program. If you bought the Xbox One version of the game digitally, you could also play the PC version, and vice versa. If you bought the PC version, you could also play the Xbox One. And I think that was a really smart addition for this game. It certainly helped increase the player base as far as the multiplayer side of things. My only very, very minor gripe about this is that if you're playing on the PC, especially, you have the option to play co-op with two people, but it's not intuitive to figure out how to join that exactly. And the Xbox party system is a little bit difficult to figure out, as you and I tried to play together. But I think that's more of a OS problem than it really is a strict problem with Forza Horizon 3 itself. But this is the most fun I've had in a racing game in quite some time. And even if you're not like a fan of these kinds of like car porn type of games, it's very easy to recommend Horizon 3. All right, Taylor, tell me what your number 8 is.
My number 8 is a handheld title, believe it or not. It's Picross 3D Round 2. I've talked about this earlier in our, I believe it was our best surprise category. And Picross, just to give you a little bit of background, it's sort of been part of Nintendo's puzzle library for many years. I mean, even going back to the Game Boy. In Japan, it's one of these puzzle styles that's a lot more popular than it is here in North America. But it just here, it's never really found the same ubiquity as other really popular franchises like Tetris or Dr. Mario, for example. And it's kind of a shame, because Picross, I really feel that Picross 3D Round 2 is the high point so far. And if you're not familiar with what Picross is, it's a number logic game. It's not a math game. So think along the same lines as Sudoku. What you're trying to do is you're using number logic to chip away at these large cubes to craft these really fun, lighthearted surprise objects. So as you're painting and chipping away at these pieces, using the rows and columns and the numbers that are trying to give you hints as to what to chip away and what to keep, then it reveals a really fun, lighthearted object. So it's very charming. It has this bookstore kind of aesthetic to it, this very airy jazz soundtrack that I think is a really great improvement on the first one. Picross 3D was originally released on Nintendo DS, this being the sequel, only available through the Nintendo eShop. It is a bit expensive. It is $30 for a digital title, so that is my one gripe. But the playability, I mean, the touchscreen works amazingly well to select and rotate the sculpture you're trying to work with. I never really missed the square I was truly aiming for, so it does a great job at teaching you its controls and preventing you from making very costly mistakes, because a puzzle can take anywhere from 1 minute to complete to 10 minutes to complete. It all depends on how familiar you are with the concept of Picross. And breaking down a large cube into these recognizable objects and using your problem solving, your critical thinking is very, very rewarding. One of the best 3DS games I've played in a while. Like, there are a lot of games on handheld where I play for maybe an hour and then I just feel spent, that feeling that I've got to put the game down and move on to something else. And this is a great game you can pick up anytime. And the replayability, I have to say, is really, really good. This is a chock full of puzzles in here. It takes you quite a bit to get through it. So highly, highly recommend it for any puzzle solvers out there. What a great concept and a great, great improvement, especially with the addition of amiibo support as well. Using amiibo allows you to unlock very special puzzles. So I thought that was a neat addition this time around, as opposed to Picross 3D originally on DS. So number 7. What do you got, Ryan?
My number 7 game. So there were a lot of major AAA militaristic first-person shooters released this fall, but my personal favorite of the ones that came out is Titanfall 2. That's my number 7 game. And basically, this game embraces everything that the original Titanfall was all about and evolves it. Originally some of the gripes from the beta were that Titans were more vulnerable. However, I did find that at least on the multiplayer side, they were more customizable based on the situation. The loadouts are way more filled out. On the single player side, you kind of unlock the newer Titans that have different abilities as the story progresses. And that really lends itself to really fun situations, scenarios where you can kind of change your Titan based on what you're combating. And it's honestly a lot of fun. The single player campaign is surprisingly really, really good. Has a story that, the original Titanfall did not have a single player campaign, and this one does. And the story of BT and your pilot, who might as well be, forget what his name is, but it has some really great moments, despite it cribbing some mechanics from other games. There are mechanics in there from like Singularity and Portal, where you're basically puzzle solving. You're running the gauntlet. You're trying to flip switches while shooting guys, while jumping back and forth between time. It's a really, really fun, smart single player campaign, unlike a lot of the other really drawl, boring ones that we've seen of late. And the multiplayer clan system, I have to say, is a really, really smart addition to the game. The original Titanfall had a problem where its player base shrinked quite a bit after release. And this is the problem a lot of multiplayer games experience, actually. New games come out and people aren't as interested in playing these multiplayer modes. And all of a sudden, it becomes a ghost town. But in Titanfall 2, they actually introduced a really smart system where you clan up and then basically you hit up a playlist and it asks people in your clan if they want to join it. And it's really, really smart. It makes getting into a game a lot quicker. There's a lot less downtime between sessions. It's really, really fun. I wouldn't be surprised to see this idea floated into other multiplayer first-person shooter games. And the combat just feels very fluid. It feels very good in motion. Although your mileage may vary as to whether you can actually shoot while running, but just the variety in the weapons and just the how it feels in motion. This is a game that basically cribbed what Mirror's Edge was trying to do as far as parkour style movement in a game, and makes it really fun and makes it make sense in the context of a first-person shooter. So really, really great game. I highly recommend you check out Titanfall 2. The price of that game has dropped off significantly, so if you haven't checked it out yet, I highly, highly recommend it.
It's a shame more people didn't really get to enjoy it because I left it off my top 10 list, but I had a great time. I felt that it was very underrated. I'll leave it at that.
Definitely. Tell me what your number 7 is, Taylor.
My number 7 is also super hot, something you mentioned earlier, which was your number 10. For me, I put it up a little bit higher. I will agree with how you described the game earlier, but I do want to get a little bit more into the campaign. So it is single player only, but the environments are incredible. This art style to it. The arenas are styled out of white concrete, everything, the chairs, cars, everything. It's this uniform white. Enemies are these humanoid shapes without any features on them, but they're highlighted red. They shatter when you kill them. So that style right there, what I'm describing in a shooter, is awesome. It's this really stark, minimalistic presentation that I think really gives it that edge. And even when you back out of the levels, when you're interacting with the story, there's this retro command line interface that's just filled with Easter eggs. There's this even ASCII art that's in there. All these weird, simple mini games also. It's very interesting. I really like it. It's kind of short, so it only takes about 2 to 3 hours to complete. But once you're done, you do get these mutator challenge modes, which are really fun to go back into and try to beat in the best time. I mean, for a first-person shooter, one of the most innovative that I've played in a long time. What a really neat mechanic to introduce a bullet time there, but in a way that's really smart. As you move, enemies move. As you move, bullets move. So it really boils down to more of puzzle solving and critical thinking versus sheer skill. Okay.
I think where Superhot excels is that it puts you into these impossible scenarios and it makes you feel very powerful, right? There's that one level where an elevator opens and 3 guys with shotguns are ready to just ambush you. And because of the way the mechanics work, like it's possible to like dodge all his shots or like approach it where you hide behind the elevator door and wait for them to come in. Like that game makes you feel super powerful in a really like simple way.
Yeah. I mean, it's that combination of that gameplay, those systems, the presentation overall for it, and the plot, which I think is really neat. Despite it being somewhat short, I think it's really, really something special there. It's great, and I've heard great things about Superhot VR as well, although we haven't played that one. We did play the PC version, controllable on mouse and keyboard, not in a VR headset, but yeah, it seems tailor-made for VR too, so really, really, really cool. Moving on to number 6, what do you got, Ryan?
All right, for me, number 6 was Uncharted 4, A Thief's End. This is, for me, probably the best-looking PS4 game so far this generation. Naughty Dog always does amazing technology with the PlayStation platforms. They did that with Uncharted 3. They did that with The Last of Us. And here they are at it again with Uncharted 4. Just a really, really gorgeous game. For me, the level that really sells that is there's a level in the middle of the game where you're with your brother and you're on a boat. And you have this opportunity to go to kind of this like side area where you're kind of playing Marco Polo with dolphins. And the water texture just looks beautiful. It's like this serene blue. And it's just like, what an amazing looking game. And I'm not even somebody who really likes graphics, but Uncharted 4 has some really fun level design. The auction level is a level I'm going to remember. For the setup for that level was something that I thought was really fun. I will say that it does rely a little bit too much on the painted ledges stuff that we've criticized the like Assassin's Creed games before and previous Uncharted titles. There's like white chalk on a lot of surfaces that you're supposed to climb, and I get that. They do a better job this go around of like making it more seamless and make it a little more natural. It's still there though. Stealth actually feels like a viable option in Uncharted 4, which makes me really happy. They've introduced some levels where you a little bit more open world. You drive around in a Jeep. There are some puzzles to solve with the winch. Getting the Jeep up into higher places. The characters are just like Naughty Dog is bar none some of the best story writers in the industry, and Sam Drake introducing Nathan's brother into this is just like a really smart addition. Really kind of plays off Nathan Drake's personality and kind of shows you why like Nathan Drake isn't such like the best guy that you've the Joker that you've really like come to know him as. And it's a really great game. The final boss is also a little bit of a letdown, like Rafe with that sword play. It's like the first time you're entering that fencing mechanic, and I think that kind of sucks, but it doesn't really, for me, detract too much from a really like cool ending. That the post credit sequence where you find out that there's a daughter. Nathan and Elena have a daughter, and she's starting to get into the like adventuring Indiana Jones lifestyle that they've embraced. And also, like the multiplayer mode is surprisingly good. It runs at 60 frames a second. It's really smooth. It's like it has no right to be as good as it is. Uncharted 4 is a complete package. A really, really cool highlight of this generation so far. And I have to say that moment with the dinner scene where you get to play Crash Bandicoot, Naughty Dog really embracing its legacy. And then that kind of led up to some hype about and some speculation about that Crash Bandicoot trilogy that they did announce. Like, what a fun moment to include in Uncharted 4. You get to play one of those Crash levels where you run towards the camera, with a boulder chasing you. Just like a really, really fun moment from the PS1 era that like now a whole new generation of players is going to get to relive. What a highlight of the series, of the Uncharted franchise. Like a really, really great series that finally has its capstone in number 4. All right, Taylor, I would like to know what your number 6 is.
6 is Battlefield 1 for me. This is the best Battlefield has really ever been. And it's interesting because it's not a modern shooter. This is in World War I. The multiplayer on this, it's definitely the best multiplayer shooter, I think, of this generation so far. The developer DICE has always been known for its excellent large-scale warfare gameplay, and there's just something about putting it in World War I setting that I think is awesome. Between the tanks that you're driving, the prop planes that you're riding, the Zeppelin, oh my god, that for me was incredible seeing that for the first time. So what happens is, if you're in a battle in multiplayer and your team is really far behind, you get awarded what's called a behemoth. And depending on the map, you get a different one. Sometimes it's a train or a battleship. It's an overwhelming weapon that can help turn the tide of battle. In some maps, it's a Zeppelin. And you get to go up in there if you're on that team and shoot down enemies on the ground with a Gatling gun, whatever. But then, if you're on the opposing team, you try to destroy the Zeppelin, it just explodes in this Hindenburg style, right? If you've ever seen footage or photos of that thing, there's just this giant exploding balloon in the sky that's slowly falling down. And then it becomes part of the environment. Once the Zeppelin lands, it's there permanently. So you see the charred frame of it just on the landscape. It's really incredible. But seeing that in game and having it run very smoothly, even though this Zeppelin is exploding in really large games, I think it was like 16 players that were in the game that I was in. I mean, I was overwhelmed by how great it looked. And that was just one example, but there are a lot of set pieces, especially in the campaign, which, albeit is kind of short. You're jumping around different theaters of war where you're playing as an American or a Frenchman or the English. It's really incredible. Beautiful, beautiful voice acting. Very believable characters. Humanizing war in a way I don't think I've ever seen in any campaign. That first mission is really, really amazing. It just felt like the multiplayer and the guns and the vehicles, the complete package really felt built for the World War I setting. Really incredible and gorgeous. I don't think I've ever had a better time with Battlefield than this one. And moving on to number 5. Ryan, go ahead.
My number 5 game was Hitman, a surprise entry for me because I typically don't like games that are presented in this episodic structure, but it paid off, I think, with Hitman. I waited until the complete first season was over, And the episodic structure actually worked very well despite initial misgivings about it. I would still say, however, that the best episodes were the first two levels, Paris and Sapienza. I'm bummed that I missed some of the elusive targets. So these are kind of like time limited events where you enter into these same levels and you go after specific targets, NPCs that you wouldn't normally have noticed before. They did some like unique voiceover work for some of these. Like one of the elusive targets was they had a contest on social media and they got Gary Busey to do VO for this game, and it was just like, I'm bummed that I didn't get the chance to kill Gary Busey in a Hitman game, but it's definitely for sure the best playing in this series. Unlike previous entries, this actually does feel like a true Assassin's Playground. Just a lot of like fun weapons and fun scenarios that it drops you into. And then the like opportunities that the game kind of like that serves you up as like breadcrumb trails to pursue, to like get you to closer to their specific targets or your specific objectives, depending on the level, like really pushes you into like really cool kills, but it doesn't actually like it doesn't play the game for you. It like leads you all the way until the end of the opportunity, and then you kind of have to figure out like what to do from there, like how to complete the opportunity. And I think that's a really like smart structure for the way this game is set up. And for me, my favorite personal moment was the second time playing Sapienza. That's the like level in Italy. There's a golf instructor that you can knock out and take his disguise. So I did that. And so I took his disguise, I took his cell phone, and I arranged a romantic meetup with one of the targets that he's supposed to be having an affair with. And once she approached me, I killed her, stuffed her in a bathroom closet. And then I realized that the AI in that game, if you just knock them out, they like run back and try to get their costume back. So I'm sitting there like I just stuffed this lady into a closet. She's my target. And then like the golf instructor naked runs past me. Like I'm still wearing his suit. He goes into the very bathroom where I hid her. He opens the closet to like get his clothes. And then I'm just like, oh shit, he's going to like discover me. And I like knock him out and I put him in the same closet. I was just like, I can't believe that just happened. That was so amazing. This Hitman is all about watching a game system break in really funny ways, watching AI routines go slightly off kilter, and presenting to the player these ideas about like, well, what should you do next? You know, these enemy patrols that you're trying to distract, you're trying to like run past so that they don't recognize you. Like, what happens if we switch them up from time to time? And it's just really, really fun and wacky. This game does not take itself seriously, but it's challenging without being punishing. The last few levels, the Colorado and Hokkaido levels, really force you to rethink how you've been playing the quote hiding in plain sight style that the game really, really encourages. This game, like, I'm so excited to see a season 2 of this Hitman game. Would not expect that I would have been excited this much about this game, but man, it turned out way better than I expected. All right, Taylor, what was your number 5?
My number 5, you already mentioned this as your, number 8. My number 5 is also Forza Horizon 3. I have it higher on my list, perhaps because I haven't played the past Forza Horizon games, but I had a great time with this. This is truly a masterclass in open world racing. I've played others like Need for Speed Underground or Most Wanted, for example. It's just bigger, better across the board in all categories. Not much more to say about it than what you already covered, but I just have to say the car models look incredible. The environment, the Australian outback is beautiful. You're going from a jungle to a beach to the desert to an urban environment. It's just the sprawling setting that I think is magnificent. It's awesome, awe-inspiring, and it never really loses the sight of the fact that you're ridiculously tearing through these locations that you really shouldn't be, right? You're in this dune buggy, but you're riding through sometimes like in a suburban environment through homes. It's really fun and lighthearted. It's a racing game that I'm not really a fan of racing games in general, but for something that has the perfect blend of simulation and arcade styles, I think really appeals to a wide range of racing fans. So if you are not as skilled in shifting gears and drifting and steering correctly. There's definitely a difficulty curve there because these cars drive, I imagine, in a very similar way than that they do in real life. But I mean, it still is accessible, and you can even adjust skill sliders to give you an advantage in certain areas, like easier steering, easier AI, things like that. I just think it's really, really a great racing game. One of my favorites in the last few years, and possibly the best game I think I've ever seen graphics wise on an Xbox One. Just really visually amazingly beautiful. And since Ryan sort of already talked about the other aspects of that game, we can go ahead and move on to number 4.
My number 4 is Hyper Light Drifter, a really, really cool game that I don't think enough people checked out. But mechanically, just to briefly get into it, it feels a lot like the Super NES classic Zelda Link to the Past. That combat mixed with some bullet hell tendencies. Really, really cool gameplay. And also it's one of those games that tells a really neat, cool story without saying a word. It reminds me a lot of that game from a few years ago, Fez. It has also a very similar art style, which is, I have to say, a very phenomenal art style, very striking. In the first 5 minutes, there's like an amazing opening cutscene that kind of shows you the state of the world and how the Drifter kind of came to be. And then you like wake up in a campfire and you try to get back to town, and then you just overlook this like amazing cliffside vista. It's really, really some really awesome stuff that's done with very simple pixel graphics. Just the movement in that game. So you unlock upgrades as you kind of find collectibles in the environment. And a pro tip for you is that you should probably unlock the dodge upgrades pretty early. You have the option of unlocking more sword moves or more ammo for your guns or more health. But I strongly recommend that you upgrade your dodge capabilities early on, because it totally changes the way that the game is played, the way that movement works, the way the combat system works. It makes it a lot more manageable, a lot easier, and a lot more fun to traverse some of the very neat areas of that game. And it's a very short experience. You could probably complete it in about 6 to 10 hours. You don't get anything for 100%ing the game. You kind of collect these like diamond pieces to unlock doors and the boss battles in that game. You don't have to collect all of them to complete the game, but if you do, it doesn't do anything special. But in order to like find every single diamond piece, like if you decide to do that, the game offers like some really difficult combat challenges, some really interesting puzzles that await you if you decide to 100% it. It's just like one of those games that took me completely by surprise. If you are a fan of games like Dark Souls, where combat feels very deliberate, but also fast paced, and it has this kind of like weird cadence and rhythm to it, you're definitely going to like Hyper Light Drifter. That's especially what I found. It was just like a very neat indie surprise for me. That was just really, really super cool. All right. What was your number 4?
There's a bit of a pattern here. We have some repeats here. It seems like you're covering them first, and then I'm getting into them. My number 4 was Hitman, your number 5, Ryan. Hitman, so the episodic style at first was a huge turnoff for me, but after it ended, this complete first season, which I believe that they're bundling now, it's going to be available as a physical release eventually. It's just wonderful. The best Hitman game I've played, just like Battlefield with Battlefield 1. Definitely the best in the series so far. I mean, he's back, this really confident design. Just the ability to experiment in this one is definitely something I really appreciate, because with past Hitmans, I felt that they were very much silent assassin focused and less about finding creative ways to murder or create accidents for your victims, your targets. So it just gives these really hilarious opportunities. And sometimes, depending on the level, you can get locked out of some opportunities. But the way that they've improved how you can track these opportunities, they really do a great job at guiding you in this open world style where you are going around a level, not quite sure how to approach the targets without getting detected, but then they're giving you tool tips to say, hey, all of a sudden there's this disguise available. Maybe you might be able to sneak in this way. And it will leave waypoints and markers on the map in game, so you can better find these things. So it leaves a lot less frustration for me than past Hitman games. I mean, the kills themselves also, I have to say, the assassinations and the opportunities are really creative. I don't want to get into too many spoilers because this game isn't very story heavy, but you really should experience how, you can kill, I think it was the 5 total targets or 4 total targets in the Colorado level where you're infiltrating this mercenary base. And each one of them has their own little story that lets them give up their guard, so to speak. And the way you are approaching these barns is really interesting. There's so many different ways you can tackle these, and this applies to every level. It really is a sandbox that anyone can enjoy. And one of the best tutorial levels ever. This is a game that I felt really did a great job about holding your hand. About if you've never played any other Hitman games, you definitely want to play this one first. Really, really incredible. The levels are perfectly sized. And even with the newer missions where you actually go back to the same levels, but instead have different targets and you're at a different time of day, for example, like the Sapienza mission where the first time around you're trying to kill, I believe it's like...
You're going after 2 targets and then you also have to destroy an object, right?
Right. And that's the first time you visit Sapienza. The second time you're actually trying to kill this action movie star. And that's taken around like a different area of the map, which I think is really, really fun way to reuse some of the same environments. So really great Hitman game. Definitely the best that they've ever put out so far. Very pleased with what Square Enix and IO Interactive did with that series. They really revived it for sure. And moving on to the home stretch here, we have our top 3 personal Editor's Choice Awards. Ryan, started off with your number 3.
All right, my number 3 is probably a niche title for some of you, but for me is like a game that was tailor-made, dropped right into my lap. Stardew Valley. This game is amazing. This is the better than Harvest Moon game I never knew I wouldn't stop playing. I've played 92 hours of it so far, probably the most I've put into a game this entire year. And last year, our game of the year, our consensus pick was Metal Gear Solid 5. I think I put about 120 hours into that. So that just tells you how much I've really invested into Stardew Valley. This is like a dating simulator, a dungeon crawler, a farming simulator, a crafting game, all wrapped up into one. Really, really neat package. All made by mostly one person. And I think of those games that have come out in recent years, Axiom Verge, Undertale, etc., this one is my personal favorite of that kind of the way those games have been developed. Stardew Valley is awesome. It's a really like colorful, chill vibe. The town feels very real. The NPC characters that you interact with feel like living, breathing personalities and not like placid stand-ins for tropes like so many of the Harvest Moon type games do. Very addicting, much like the Civilization games. You'll wonder where like one more day in Stardew Valley will actually end. You start playing that game at like 8 o'clock in the evening, and then you was like, oh, one more day, and then it's like 4 o'clock in the morning, and your farm is like way more built up, and you're wondering where your time went. It's just that addicting, and the game keeps just adding really smart features post-release. New romanceable NPCs, new systems for farming, new products that you can like create. It's like from top to bottom, just a really, really great game that came out of nowhere, complete surprise to me. And like for so many of the games that came out this year are hyper violent or are intended to get your pulse racing and your heart really moving. And this game is the complete opposite of that, and yet still manages to be very, very engaging. Even if you're not a fan of games like this, I highly recommend you check out Stardew Valley. It's an amazing accomplishment that a one-person game can come out and just be like the indie hit of the year. Amazing, amazing accomplishment. All right, Taylor, what was your number 3?
Yeah, my number 3 is Doom. This game, incredible. Visceral, violent, bloody, satanic. It is so what Doom has been and what we've been missing from the series, I think, for a while. I just love the moments in this game, the set pieces, The single player campaign, it was totally unexpected for me. The multiplayer, I think, is a little bit bad, but the single player on its own, I don't think it's an understatement to say it's one of the best campaigns I think I've ever played because of the overall presentation. The environments are really terrifying. The blood, the gore, the characters, the demon, the design is wonderful. The unrelenting enemies that are you're always combating. Like it is also somewhat difficult, which I really, really appreciate. A lot of times we try to play these first person shooter campaigns and it's just pretty easy to run through. This one though, very, very challenging. There's just action constantly all the way, slaughter all the time. Really cool, fun, brilliant glory kill mechanics where if you approach an enemy and you try to melee attack them, instead what you do is, and they have to be whittled down to low health, you kill them in a gruesome way, whether it's stomping on their heads or ripping off their limbs, things like that. They award you bonus health, bonus armor, bonus ammo, things like that. It's got all your favorite enemies that you remembered in the past Doom series and weapons. Just really, really solid, complete single-player shooter package. The aesthetics alone, it's just dripping in blood and satanic rituals. Incredible, incredible, incredible. I thought every single level I played in Doom, I had this wow moment every time I would reach a boss, for example. Like, what an achievement. I really, really love this as a great surprise for this year. And now we're down to our top two. So, Ryan, what do you got for number two?
Number two, Overwatch. This game is probably the most fun I've had in a multiplayer shooter in years. Call it Team Fortress 3 if you will, but it deserves way better than that. It's a better and more accessible shooter than it has any right to be from Blizzard, who doesn't make these kinds of games. It's basically they had this like Titan MMO that they salvaged assets from and completely turned the story around on this game's development and made into Overwatch. Like, has a really diverse set of characters and character classes. Each respawn feels different. Playing the different roles, playing different characters, everything feels super balanced, super fun. Every design choice that they made is whether they made it fun or more practical. They always kind of like did the right thing of like splitting the difference right down the middle. I happen to main Zenyatta, who's a healing character, and Mei, which is kind of like a more support class. But no matter the character you choose or the ones that you play typically as, like, it's a lot of fun. I wish more people would kind of actually switch their characters mid game, but this game is just like awesome. I would say, however, that for me, the ranked mode basically soured some of my experience with the game. Thankfully, you don't have to engage with it. You can just play quick play or the arcade modes and avoid all the toxicity of ranked mode if you so choose. But this is a game that is definitely more enjoyable with friends. If you have a squad of 6 or 2 or 3 or 4 or however many friends you can get to play with you, is immensely more fun. It's a lot of fun to cooperate with people and get on that payload or reach this objective or like dominate another team. It's even fun when you lose. This is not a game where like it's all about the kill death ratio. It's more about how you contributed overall to the team effort. And it does a great job with the play of the game and the highlights. And there isn't really like a true progression. You just progress towards more skins and sprays and emotes and like really fun cosmetic unlocks instead of like new guns or new character loadout slots or whatever. And unlike a lot of other gaming fandoms, I find the conversation around Overwatch really fun and endearing. The way people have really like glommed on to the characters and their backstories has been like super interesting to watch. I've liked a lot of the seasonal updates, the additions. They've done all, free DLC for this game. They've added Anna, which is a really smart sniper healing hybrid class character. Sombra, which is also another fun character to play as. New levels, new skins. The Halloween update made me realize that I really did enjoy that single player horde style mode, and I think that is the one thing Overwatch is missing. This game does require other people to play, and I think that's for me kind of what detracts from it.
That it's missing the single player element?
That it's missing a single player element that like basically once this game's player base dies out eventually, which right now there are no signs of that, to be sure. But once that dies out, like, you're not going to be able to really enjoy this game. Playing this game against bots in that bot mode is not very fun. I think their seasonal updates have been really smart so far. I just hope that they introduce that like wave-based mode that they showed off in the Halloween season, because that was like a surprising amount of fun. And the game just has a very colorful Saturday morning cartoon vibe that like really makes this game colorful and not this like drab militaristic first-person shooter that most of these styles of games tend to be. And for me, that's why it's like way high up on my list. Just a lot of fun. All right, Taylor, what is your number 2 game of the year?
Another duplicate I have for my list is Uncharted 4: A Thief's End as my number 2. Your number 6. I'll go through this really quickly because you've said what I would have said a lot about this game. There's astounding graphics. There's really jaw-dropping moments that I think is a hallmark for the series. But I have to say, without playing the other Uncharted games, this game definitely stands by itself. There's definitely really improved platforming, stealth, traversal systems in this one. There's definitely a more open level design. I don't think it's as obvious as you described in finding where you need to leap to next or to a path that you need to take. I think that the environments themselves are designed in a way to give you environmental hints, but in a really fun, exploratory way. There's definitely great storytelling, performances by everyone. The characters themselves are really truly captivating. The settings this time around, which is sort of this pirate themed, you're often going to like these treasure islands, especially towards the back half of the game. Really awesome to look at. Definitely heavily scripted, but I still think really is jaw-droppingly awesome. I don't want to get into spoilers too much, but very fun twists in Uncharted 4. And the multiplayer, I did play with that a little bit. Really appreciated how they introduced challenges to keep you coming back into it. So sort of like daily quests in order to give you more experience, to unlock new skins, new dances. The game modes themselves are really fun. You know, you have Capture the Flag, you have like a team deathmatch, so on and so forth. What I think Uncharted 4 does really well is it's very smart writing and humor. Nathan Drake is very charming, but the cast around him is also very much the same way. So definitely my second favorite game from this year. And now we're down to our final favorite game for this year, our Personal Editor's Choice Awards. Wrapping this list up, Ryan, tell me your final number 1 for 2016.
My number 1 game for this year is Doom. You put it a little bit lower on your list, but I really enjoyed this game. It was such a surprise for me. And I will try to not repeat what you said about it, but what's so amazing about this game is that it manages to pay tribute to the old games, Doom and Doom 2, while also retaining and adding modern game design and its own great systems, and manages to make it feel both like old Doom and new Doom. It's this like really cool thing that like on paper, this Doom game should not have been any good. It has very like standard tropes. It has hell. It has blood. It has guns. On paper, it should be the most boring revisiting of a franchise ever. And instead, it's like one of the most captivating things I've ever seen in video games. It really captures the aesthetic it's going for. It's appropriately gory. The one thing you didn't mention, the metal demonic soundtrack. Like, I'm not even somebody who really likes metal music, and the soundtrack really got me into the combat, really made me feel like everything I was doing was very epic. The updates to the monster designs that were in line with old Doom feel weirdly plausible. It made it feel like, cacodemons could really exist. The Mancubus also looked super hyper realistic. The final boss, the like spider mastermind, also looked like kind of off-putting how realistic that thing looked like. And the story is actually really good, and like story in a Doom game, like who would have thunk, right? Like, and it's also weirdly like making fun of the whole like reverence around Doom and shooters as a franchise, right? Like, we've all worshipped the Doom guy as the savior of humanity, and the game takes that trope and really runs and plays with it. I think the characters are really well done. The story is like really well filled out. A lot of like small details that you could kind of miss. The guy who's supposed to be helping you, his name is Samuel Hayden, and if you say his name kind of slowly, S. Hayden, Satan, like that was something I didn't get until somebody told it to me.
Yep.
It's just, and he turns out to be the bad guy, and the setup, they've left the story for this Doom to set up for a Doom 2 remake that I would be super excited to play now, that I wouldn't have anticipated I would have been before. And there's like an upgrade mechanic in a Doom game. We wouldn't have expected that, right? It makes the collectibles, playing through that game, going through the secrets, playing the challenge levels, a lot more satisfying than it normally would be. I agree with you that the multiplayer is at best very adequate. It's
average. Yep.
Average. It's reminiscent of Quake and Unreal Tournament, despite not being as innovative as those two games have been. And the single player is really the like standout feature. Snap Map, that's the kind of like custom build your own level mode in this game. Some people are doing some really neat stuff with Snap Map. If you're done with the single player campaign, I highly recommend you check out some of the most downloaded levels on that. Some really neat stuff in there, but just like what an incredible thing this remake remaster of a 20-year-old game property is. Doom is such an achievement in 2016. My favorite game of this year. Taylor, tell me what your number one is.
My number one is Overwatch. What an incredible multiplayer game. I'm having still so much fun with it. I definitely am going to keep playing this game even without known party members. I'm going to play this game on my own with a bunch of random people. I think this is one of the very few shooters that does a great job of handicapping everyone on the same team in terms of if you have someone with a really high skill ceiling, it really doesn't matter. It's really about the synergy between the characters that you select themselves. If you have a full team of all the same characters, they're all the same assault class, offense class, then you're probably not going to succeed. These games are objective based. It is strictly not team deathmatch, not free for all, and it really requires a lot of cooperation and combinations that you definitely have to pay attention to between the characters. Something that I really appreciate about this game. It rewards very good balanced builds and teamwork above all else. And for most shooters, and Blizzard has done a great job about combating this, I think the toxicity, I haven't really encountered this because I totally avoid the rank play, but the overall spirit of Blizzard games, I think online, is that you have positive experiences. And Overwatch also, in its gameplay, highlights the positive aspects of your performance. It does not highlight your deaths. You cannot see that within your game. It will show you play of the game, no matter if you're a healer or you made a defensive move or you've killed 5 people really quickly. It will reward positive play. And it's sort of this subconscious positive reinforcement that makes you want to keep playing the game. You get these consecutive match bonuses that keep you engaged. You get these amazing skins. I don't think I've ever seen better skins in any game. Like, the designs are fantastic. I really love what they've done with the DLC and the timed holiday events. So far they've done the Olympics, the Summer Olympics, which is really cool. New game modes associated with that, and Halloween, and right now we're going through a winter one, which is up, I believe, until January 2nd. But everything about the game, just gorgeous graphics, very intuitive controls, super accessible, and really adapts to a bunch of different play styles. You can choose to main a tank character, or you can choose to main a very shifty, tricky character like Tracer, for example. It's just the frustrations I have with it are very minor, which is sort of hard for me to say because as critics of video games, we tend to find and nitpick about the things that we don't like. But there are very few things I would change about this game. It is almost perfect in nearly every aspect. Wonderful multiplayer shooter. One of the best I've ever played, truly. Call it Team Fortress 3 like Ryan said, but what Blizzard has done to improve the multiplayer shooter experience is bar none wonderful. All right, so maybe we should recap our personal top 10 lists Ryan, why don't you read through yours? I'll read through mine, and then we'll debate our consensus game of the year. We'll make the final award. Go ahead.
Absolutely. My number 10 was Dark Souls 3. My number 9 was Super Hot. Number 8, Forza Horizon 3. Number 7, Titanfall 2. Number 6, Uncharted 4, A Thief's End. Number 5, Hitman. Number 4, Hyper Light Drifter. Number 3, Stardew Valley. Number 2, Overwatch. And for me, my favorite game of 2016 was Doom. All right, Taylor, let's run through your top 10 list.
My number 10 is Rez Infinite. Number 9, Enter the Gungeon. Number 8, Picross 3D Round 2. Number 7, Super Hot. Number 6, Battlefield 1. Number 5, Forza Horizon 3. Number 4, Hitman. Number 3, Doom. Number 2, Uncharted 4, A Thief's End. And number 1 is Overwatch for me.
All right. In the interest of keeping this conversation very focused and very tight, what I've done for this consensus game of the year discussion, we're basically going to pick one consensus for our site game of the year and 2 runners up. I've taken the top 5 games for each one of our lists and put them down here for purposes of our discussion. So I'm just going to read down this list of candidates, okay? All right. For a consensus game of the year, we have Doom, Overwatch, Uncharted 4, A Thief's End, Hitman, Hyper Light Drifter, Forza Horizon 3, and Stardew Valley. Okay, Taylor, I think 2 games that appeared both in our top 3 were definitely Doom and Overwatch, and I think this conversation is mostly going to evolve around what our third candidate is going to be. So, what do you think?
Well, I want to eliminate a few here that I don't think deserve to be our number 1 because it's going to be very difficult to beat Doom and Overwatch. I agree there. Stardew Valley, it was not on my list. I'm not interested in that style of game, so I'm safe with cutting that. I'm also safe with cutting Hyper Light Drifter. That was only on your list too. Not a real huge fan of it either. I don't think either will hold a candle to the rest on this list.
It's a bummer for me to see them go. These were some of my favorite games. Stardew Valley in particular, I've spent so much time with this year, but I can concede that is kind of a title that has very niche interests. And Hyper Light Drifter is also going to only really appeal to people who are more about fast-paced reflex games, and I understand that that's not for everybody. So we can cut those 2 games definitely from the conversation. I think for me, I would definitely cut Uncharted 4, despite how high it appears on your list. I think it is probably the strongest entry in the franchise for sure. But as somebody who has played all the Uncharted games, they've recently released that Uncharted collection. Uncharted 4 is like another one of those. And I think the story of that game is very well done, very well told, very well written. They've introduced some new characters that make the game feel very fresh. But this is another one of those like summer action blockbusters that makes it feel very like a summer game. Like a lot of people have summer jams, and I think Uncharted 4 was definitely this year's summer jam in the video games industry. So I would be okay with cutting it from our top 3 discussion.
I am too, and it's this game that I thought was amazing, but as I kept playing it, I started seeing more and more of its faults, and I thought it dragged a little bit in terms of its plot. Still, all of these games are definitely worthy, are great, some of our favorites from this year. This list of 7 that we've picked to debate through our consensus game of the year, we're not saying that these are bad games by cutting them from this list. They're just not our overall number 1. So Uncharted 4, I'm okay with it not being one of our top 3. So now we're down to Doom, Overwatch, Hitman, and Forza Horizon 3, meaning we do have to cut one more, and the top 3 we will have to debate. For me, I'm going to have to say Forza Horizon 3. That would be my pick.
I feel completely opposite because I think Hitman appears higher on both of our lists than Forza Horizon 3. Hitman is one of those games
No, I'm saying cut it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I would cut Forza Horizon 3 from this list, only because while I think Forza Horizon 3 is an amazing game, beautiful, really fun, really accessible racing title, I don't think, despite how accessible it is, that a lot of people are going to go for it if they're not into car racing games. And despite its really like lighthearted setting, I do have some misgivings about the way that the multiplayer aspect of that game has turned out to work. There is some like free-to-play microtransaction stuff in there that also feels kind of super sloppy. The progression where you level up your guy and you unlock new venues is totally fine. But the other side of the progression where you level up and basically you take a chance at the slots, and the slot machine is always it's either a new car or a set amount of cash, and it always happens to fall on the set amount of cash is a little bit suspect.
Yep. It's definitely a bummer.
I don't like the way that works. You know, I think the game is very fun and lighthearted, but some of its trappings makes me feel like it shouldn't be one of our top 3.
Yeah, I think the party mechanics, the way they handle the multiplayer is kind of clunky and awkward, and I have to give it a downgrade for that because it's a shame because once you get it started, I mean, it takes a while, but once you start cooperatively participating in events, that's really, really fun. But for me, a racing game, it's kind of hard to choose it as one of my top 3 games of the year. It's just racing over and over again, despite the variety of cars and the beautiful environments and the intuitive controls, how natural the driving feels. I don't know, the mechanics surrounding Forza Horizon, the levels, the experience that you gain and leveling is a bit awkward. And I just can't look past some of its limitations. So, I think we've nailed this down to Doom, Overwatch, and Hitman. I think we can make this easy. I think it's between Doom and Overwatch myself, just because we both have it in our top 3s. You have Doom as your overall number 1. I have Doom as my overall number 3. I have Overwatch as my number 1, but you have Overwatch as your number 2. So I think we both know how this is going to go. But Hitman, though, we can say our piece about that. We've said a bunch about it already, but really looking forward to the second season from that game. So it is definitely something to be paying close attention to from next year on. Really the best, again, I have to say this again, the best Hitman has ever been. If you were not a fan of stealth mechanics before, don't worry. You can still play the game well. Even if you just want to have a Jason Voorhees style murdering spree, you can still do that and not feel like you're not having fun. And I really like the challenge mechanics behind this game. There's a lot of replayability here. As you complete certain actions, as you progress in certain opportunities, you complete challenges, and then there are harder challenges it unlocks. There's even special items and weapons that you can unlock from completing these per map. And that is something brand new to Hitman that I really, really loved about it. The fact that you can go back in and see for yourself all the many different ways you can tackle the mission to take out your targets. And they're all very, very different and very, very interesting. Keeps you definitely coming back for more. Unless you want to look at a stream of this or a replay, someone else playing through these to watch some of these other kills. I don't recommend that, though. Play it for yourself because they are very, very rewarding.
Right, and who knew a game about such a grim subject, right? Like being a hitman, being somebody who like kills people. That should be something that's like pretty grim, pretty dark, which previous Hitman games have been about. This is a game that like doesn't take itself seriously, but that's like actually a compliment. This is a game where they really like laugh at the kind of like disguises you can get away with. There's an NPC that you can kill and disguise yourself as that basically already looks like Agent 47, just with more makeup on in the Paris level. Just really like fun spins on that. It's really fun to see like what you can get away with in that game, and like how you can run past guards in certain disguises, and how you can get away with killing your targets, and they be none the wiser. There's like one of those you were saying earlier, there was a level where you can kill the film mogul. There's a fun take on the Paris level, the second time you visit it, that they've added, where it's basically you're trying to go out, your targets are the Home Alone bandits, the wet bandits. And there's a disguise hidden in that version of the level where you can play as Santa, and you can go after the targets as Santa Claus, which is really like hilarious and fun. And this Hitman is at its best when it's both at its silliest and when you kind of approach its targets and objectives in a very non-linear way. Really an achievement, and a really like a great statement that like episodic games, despite the way that they come out and despite your misgivings about the always online nature of them, that they can be done very, very well. And Square Enix and IO have done a really great job of proving that. However, I don't think Hitman is going to be our number one game of the year. It's definitely a candidate for sure in top 3, but let's have the Doom versus Overwatch debate, Taylor. So my one beef with giving this to Overwatch, a game of the year should be a game that you can't stop playing, and you visit 5 years. If you visit it 5 years later, you'll still be able to like enjoy it in its totality. And my misgiving about Overwatch is that in 5 years, well, hopefully in 5 years, if the player base lasts that long, that you'll still be able to enjoy it. And in my time away from Overwatch, I think I was very hot and heavy the first few months with that game. Ever since then, in my time spending with other games, Overwatch has started to me look like a little worse and worse. I think Overwatch is best played in short spurts when I play like 3 to 5 matches of it over the course of like an hour, and then I walk away from it and I come back to it. Like for me, our game of the year should be something that like I don't want to walk away from. And for me, it's frustrating when I get in a streak with Overwatch with a certain team, or I jump in and out of quick play, and I just get stuck with people who like don't get on the payload, or don't like go after the objectives, or don't switch their characters based on the situations, because every character has like a super meter that you build up by completing actions or killing people or just over time. And I think most people are focused on the activating the superpower bit when they really should be changing their characters more fluidly. And this game is so reliant on the teamwork aspect of it, which is admittedly one of its biggest strengths, but I think also handicaps it a little bit, that like your enjoyment of it is so dependent on other people. That aspect of it like really frustrates me, and it was like my number 2 game of the year, right? Like this is a really fun game. Its trappings are really great. It's the way it's balanced and the level design. Almost every level and mode that you play in this game, you're going to have a good time with it. It is a very strong contender, however, and it's definitely one of the best multiplayer shooter experiences I've had in years.
Well, by that same criteria, I mean, you said we should award something that we can come back to, and Doom is one of those games that I have zero interest in replaying again. I mean, zero. That's not to say that I had a horrible time playing it the first time, not at all, quite the opposite. I had an amazing time, but the surprise and the luster is gone after you completed it for the first time. Because let's be honest, the multiplayer there is not very good. I mean, it's there. There is a complete package. There is a single player and a multiplayer shooter. But the multiplayer is totally, I mean, you could totally skip over it and be fine with saying that Doom is a great game. And I think Overwatch, for its fair share, has stripped away a lot of the fat, a lot of the sort of bad mechanics that a lot of other multiplayer shooters suffer from, like loadouts, for example. There's a strict balance here that characters have strict abilities that cannot be changed, ultimate abilities that you have to earn through kills or objectives. These ults really change the tide of battle, and I really, really love that. I mean, there isn't a campaign to explore here. There's no single player in Overwatch, but still, the very fine-tuned, tight mechanics and addictive gameplay is what Overwatch is all about. And I just think that 5 years from now, Overwatch is going to have that player base there. I mean, look at games like Diablo 2 and Diablo 3, Warcraft. Oh, wow. What else am I forgetting? Heroes of the Storm. These are games that perennially attract a player base, and Overwatch as an esports game that is rivaling Counter-Strike, Go, what else? League of Legends. It's entering that same space and succeeding because of how fair and balanced and how tight this game is. The characters, the Saturday morning cartoon feel to it, I think is very, very nice. The designs themselves, the life of the game, the colors, the level environments are visually interesting. They're not this muddled gray and green and modern, they're very fun and lighthearted, and I love it about it. It's really packed with a lot of detail that a lot of other games in the genre really, they don't have. They really lack that. Doom, I don't want to defend it too much because I think we've said what we had to say about it. It is in the same vein as past Dooms. It's not doing something original. And for me, a game of the year should be not necessarily completely original, but introduce original mechanics, ideas, fresh innovation. And Doom did that in some ways, not as well as Overwatch, in my opinion.
All right. I can kind of see where this conversation is going, but I will say one last thing. Both of these games have, across the board, on the PC versions of them, the console versions of them, both run really great, both on Doom and Overwatch. id has done a really great job, and Bethesda has done a really great job with Doom about making that run super well on both on the console and the PC versions. Very customizable. Same deal with Overwatch and Blizzard. The console versions of Overwatch run super well. The controller support on the PC, that's really the only way I want to play that game. There's some argument to be made about whether playing with keyboard and mouse gives you a little bit of advantage, but it's whatever. The mechanics of Overwatch don't really lend themselves to leaving advantage versus keyboard and mouse over controller players. But both really, really fun games. So far, Blizzard has done a really great job of issuing updates and patches, right? Like they've smoothed out the UI, they've smoothed out the lobby system, the arcade brawl that they do week to week is way better. They've now included the standard the random hero rotation, which something I think they needed to do from the get-go. The seasonal updates, the skins, they've made people really care about loot boxes, that care about them in a way that I haven't seen. People care about hats since Dota 2 or Team Fortress 2, right? These are cosmetic upgrades, and yet each one of them, even the bad ones, are look really great. And you never encounter, the way that they've been implemented, you never really encounter a player using the same skin more than once, using the same emote or using the same spray. And I think that's really, really neat. The backstory that they've included for some of these characters, they put out comics on their website, which say what you will about not including that stuff in the game, I think has been really smart. This has a really diverse set of characters. We figured out that in a comic that they put out that Tracer is a lesbian, and she's the cover character on the game. I think that's incredible that in 2016 the gaming industry has come a long way with being more inclusive and allowing the fandom to really kind of control the way that the game is the way that the game is updated and patched in the future in a way that doesn't make me feel cynical about the game industry anymore. Yeah,
Blizzard definitely, I think, engages the community a lot, much more so than a lot of companies in this industry. And I have to give them a huge round of applause for that, because they really listen to feedback. They listen to player feedback, and they think they take it to heart. And when they disagree wholeheartedly, they won't implement a change, but they'll instead explain why it's not a part of their vision. And that's something that a lot of companies will never engage with. They will never discuss development updates openly with the public. And like you said, I mean, I thought it did an amazing job. Overwatch does an amazing job with making every character appealing. There isn't a reason you should focus on mastering one character. Every character is pretty much balanced. One character has strengths and weaknesses. I don't think in the meta one is significantly overpowered than the other. And that is definitely commendable. I mean, each is beautifully designed, not just visually, but ability-wise. But there are these complex backstories that are explained in the comics, but also these digital shorts, which unfortunately are not in the game, but the lore they can keep expanding independently without you having to ever engage it. And I think this focus on gameplay, stripping away single player and stripping away story aspects from this game, gets people who don't just want to play multiplayer, just want this to be more of an esports style experience. They just want to jump in really quick. They don't have to want to wait through many menus and matchmaking and the story and skipping cutscenes. Instead, get straight to the action. And that is what Overwatch is really all about. And I really think that we should choose this over Doom. And again, not to say that Doom doesn't deserve it, but I just think that Overwatch just does so many things well in this genre that I feel that it should be 2016's Game of the Year. It is definitely the game I've spent, for what it's worth, I've spent the most time playing. I don't know about you.
I've certainly spent a lot of time with Overwatch. I will concede to you this year that Overwatch probably should deserve to be our Game of the Year. Let's go ahead and lock it in as that. I agree with you that the amount of like gameplay experiences you can have, whether you're playing by yourself or with your friends, like, yes, there are bad breaks where you can like fall into a trap with people who aren't playing the objectives or aren't cooperating well or who are all picking the same character or whatever. But generally speaking, even if you're losing, you're having a great time with this game. And I think that's a really like a high mark for a multiplayer shooter that you can still lose and still have a great time with it.
Absolutely.
When you win, of course you have a great time. But this Overwatch has the way that they've designed Overwatch is so smart that they've made just the act of playing it fun in itself without even having to give you like rewards or carrot on a stick or like a true progression system. They've done so much right with it that I agree with you. It should be our Game of the Year. So let's put it up there. Overwatch is our 2016 Game of the Year, followed with close runners-up Doom in number 2 and Hitman as our number 3 Game of the Year. Man, Taylor, whatever you agree or disagree about our choices, this has been a fantastic year in video games, and our top 3 candidates definitely say that about it.
Absolutely. It started off slow, but towards the middle and end of this year, I got to play some phenomenal games. I'm really excited about next year as well. And that's what we'll cover in our next episode. We're going to preview our most anticipated games of 2017, so look forward to that. But I want to thank all of you fans, all of you listeners who've stuck with us and have listened to our first 2 parts of our 2016 Game of the Year coverage with our special awards. This wraps it up with part 3 of our Game of the Year coverage for 2016. Thanks again for listening. So this is it for this year. Happy holidays, by the way. Remember to listen and subscribe to our show, the 1P versus 2P podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, including iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music, TuneIn, Clamor, or just bookmark our website, 1pvs2p.com, where you can read our gaming blog there too.
A wrap-up of our awards thus far is available at the link in the show notes, including all of our special awards and a little bit of description for our top 10 Editor's Choice lists and also our consensus Game of the Year for our site. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on Twitter. We're very active on our social channels at 1pvs2p_podcast if you're following us on Twitter.
Thanks to Phonetic Hero for letting us play his music for our show, as always. Coffee Stomp and Super Manly Brothers X, both of those songs part of the compilation project Chiptunes Equals Win. I'm Taylor Ray. That's my co-host, Ryan Ray. What a great 2016. See you next week, and thanks again for listening.
But real talk, if you play as Bastion, you're a bad person.